I accepted a haunted endorsement deal that put my life in danger. I never should have opened that door. The air felt thick and heavy, like it carried a warning. I was just another content creator, living my mundane life, making videos about gardening and DIY crafts. Just yesterday, I had read about this new endorsement from an old haunted house. It sounded intriguing. Spooky content was all the rage. But now, standing by that door, I realized I might have bitten off more than I could chew. My heart raced as I pushed that creaky door open. Darkness engulfed me. I could almost taste the dampness in the air, a musty scent mixed with something bitter, something threatening. Whispers danced around me, curling like smoke from unseen sources. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, and my skin prickled. I took a step inside, the floorboards groaning under my feet. The cold seeped into my bones. It shouldn't have been this cold in June. A chill snaked down my spine as I heard a soft shuffling sound behind me. I froze, terror clawing at my chest. Was I really alone? A flicker caught my eye. An old painting hung slanted on the wall, its subjects unblinking, their eyes watching my every move. My breath quickened. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, thudding loudly against the silence. Then came the noises. A loud bang echoed from somewhere deep inside the house. Another shuffle, this time closer. I could almost feel a presence, something waving just beyond the edge of my vision. My hands trembled at my sides. I felt as if the walls were closing in, wrapping around me with intent. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind whipped past me, slamming the door shut with a deafening thud. Panic shot through me. I turned, but I was trapped. I wasn't sure if it was fear or something more sinister flooding the air. The whispers grew louder, begging for my attention, urging me to listen. What had I stepped into? My skin crawled as I stumbled backward, my eyes wide with horror. There, at the dark end of the hallway, a figure began to emerge, a silhouette towering ominously against the darkness. Panic surged. I was frozen, caught in a terrible dream I couldn't wake up from. Then, a scream pierced the air. Was it mine? I tried to move, tried to run, but my feet felt heavy like lead. Just as the figure lunged toward me, darkness consumed everything. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. When I opened my eyes again, I was sprawled on the cold, hard floor. My breath came in sharp gasps, the air thick with dread. The accursed house seemed to whisper my name, a soft and taunting echo lingering just beyond reach. I could feel it watching, the very walls seeming to breathe with sinister life. Panic clawed at my throat as I scrambled to my feet, my pulse racing faster than I could comprehend. Hello? I called, my voice shaking, swallowed almost immediately by the suffocating silence. The darkness swirled around me like a living entity. I wasn't just trapped in a house, I was ensnared in a malevolent presence, and I could feel it creeping closer. A wintry draft clawed at my skin, carrying with it faint echoes of laughter, unruly and disembodied, like ghosts playing a cruel joke. I staggered toward the hallway, desperate for an escape, for any shred of reassurance that this nightmare was just that, a nightmare. The once faded wallpaper trembled beneath my fingers as I brushed against the wall for support, and I staggered back at the coldness of it. I imagined the stories of lost souls trapped in this wretched place, forever reliving their last moments. Were they begging me to leave, or were they entranced by something darker? As I turned, a flicker of movement caught my eye in the corner of the room. Against the far wall stood a mirror, its surface marred with cracks, like the dry skin of an ancient crone. I stepped closer, entranced by the distance it seemed to create between me and whatever else might dwell in that house. My own reflection stared back wide-eyed and disheveled, more ghost than human. But it was what lurked behind me in the glass that froze me in place. A figure stood, cloaked in shadow. I couldn't make out any features, but the smell decayed, like damp earth, and the coppery scent of blood slithered through the air. My breath hitched, and I whipped around, ready to confront what had slowly begun to seep into my psyche. But there was nothing. I was utterly alone, yet undeniably watched. I felt a tugging sensation at my sleeve, and I turned back to the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was closer, now discernibly human in form, wreathed in shadows that writhed as if alive. I wanted to believe it was merely a reflection, a figment conjured by my mind. But the sickening smile that grew in the depths of darkness told me otherwise. It moved with intent, languid and menacing, and a low growl echoed from somewhere deep within it, sending tremors through my limbs. That I stumbled backward, crashing into an old cabinet that rattled ominously with my weight, the glass within it responding with a chorus of soft shatters. The sound reverberated, fracturing the momentary illusion of quiet, escalating the dread to thick apprehension as I heard the scuffling sound return, this time multiple sets of footsteps, trampling over one another, closing in around me. Desperate, I backed further into the room, my heart hammering like a frantic animal. The whispers from the shadows coiled around me, urging me to turn, to face the encroaching horror, promising souls lost and the answers to everything if I only dared to listen. My rational mind screamed that I needed to escape, that this was madness, but an otherworldly curiosity clawed for dominance. With each heartbeat, the darkness shifted, writhing and pulsing as figures began to form, pale and translucent, their faces contorted in agony and anger, mouths opening in endless screams that crescendoed to a fever pitch. My mind buckled under the weight of their despair, and I grasped at the edges of my sanity. Their accusations were deafening, rebukes and terrors twisting into a singular chant: "You accepted our fate." That's when it happened. A single mirror shard tumbled from the cabinet and embedded itself in the floor with a sinister jab, twinkling like a malevolent star. As I inched closer, drawn inexplicably to the object, I heard a voice clear as day, a soft, chilling whisper right next to my ear: "You're next." Before I could react, the floor beneath my feet began to warp, the wood splintering and cracking. I glanced down and saw the reflection of my own horrified face twisting into something monstrous in the shard's surface. Then, the whispers ignited into cacophony, drowning out my thoughts. The shadows converged upon me. I stumbled backward, frantically trying to find a way out. Just as my back hit the wall, the figure in the mirror reached out, its skeletal hand stretching into the world, pulling me into a nightmare from which I feared I'd never escape. The room spun as the grasping hand of the figure tightened around my wrist, icy fingers digging into my flesh like a vice. I could feel the chill of its touch seeping through me, winding around my heart like a viper. I couldn't scream. My mouth opened, but no sound escaped. The wailing of the souls cocooned in the shadows drowned me out, an unholy chorus rising to a fever pitch, demanding release, demanding vengeance. With a wrenching force, I was pulled towards the mirror, its surface rippling like the surface of a dark lake disturbed. I fought, clawing at the air, my feet scrambling desperately against the sickening pull. But the shadows swelled with fury, the air thickening until it choked me. Just as I felt my body breaking against the mirror, the world fell away, absorbed into the void. That I gasped as I was unceremoniously expelled into a different space, landing with a heavy thud on what felt like soft earth littered with debris. I blinked, dazed, and slowly pushed myself to sit up. Surrounding me were the remnants of a crumbling garden, overgrown and wild, its vines twisted around the skeletal remains of what used to be an elegant statue. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and decay, mingling grotesquely with the distant notes of floral sweetness from long-dead blooms. I was no longer in the room. I had been thrust into some forgotten realm, where time held no meaning. The eeriness of my surroundings pressed upon me as I stood, looking around with trepidation. Whispers floated through the air like the rustling of leaves, and flickering shadows danced just beyond the reach of what little light filtered through the dense canopy of shade. I took a hesitant step forward, and as my foot squished into the damp ground, I felt something brush past my leg, a fleeting sensation that sent ice coursing through my veins. I turned, half expecting to see a child or a lost pet, but instead, the shadows writhed with a sense of mischief, laughing softly at my unease. "Welcome to our garden," a voice rasped, serpentine in its smoothness. I jumped, scanning the area for the source, but it was as if the very earth spoke, shifting with every word. "We've waited so long for you, dear one. So eager, so naive. They are all waiting for you." I could hear the pathetic groans of buried souls beneath me, their cries muffled and guttural, a symphony of despair that tightened around my throat. I took cautious steps through the dimly lit, twisted pathways, the shadows snaking around my ankles like a warning tether. I needed to find a way out, to escape this horrid garden, but it felt like an inescapable labyrinth, every turn leading me deeper into the depths of darkness rather than freedom. As I pressed further in, the laughter grew, morphing into something sinister, taunting. From beyond an archway blanketed in thorny vines, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A figure stood partially obscured, illuminated by a faint, ghostly glow. A familiar visage, it was the same figure I had seen in the mirror, the skeletal hand still outstretched, beckoning me closer with a slow, deliberate motion. "You accepted our fate," it repeated, but this time, there was a chilling clarity. "Join us, take your place in eternal misery. No more running." With each word, the figure became clearer, unveiling features of grotesque beauty marred by rot, hollow eye sockets bored down into my soul, and its wicked smile revealed rows of blackened teeth. My instincts screamed to turn away, to flee, but the allure of the figure was overpowering. I felt the pull of the shadows urging me toward it, promising comfort in unity, soothing whispers wooing the depths of my fears and longing, that I stumbled back, heart drumming in my chest, unsure whether to scream or beg for mercy. Behind me, the shadows swelled, the whispers erupting into a frenzied cacophony that seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath my feet. Just as I turned, ready to bolt, an icy grip clamped onto my shoulder, forcing me to confront the ugly reality looming behind me. Countless faces emerged from the shadows. Wretched and sorrowful, eyes full of despair and longing. They reached for me, fingers clawing at my skin, but the most haunting was the unmistakable glimmer of familiarity in their expressions. "Join us," they chanted, "we are all here for you." And then I understood, their faces warped into my past, loved ones twisted in agony, pleading for salvation. It was my fault they suffered. I had neglected them, forgotten them. Their anguish was my own, and now it threatened to swallow me whole. Staring into their hollowed eyes, the darkness coiled around me tighter, my heart breaking as I tried to scream a desperate cry for forgiveness or for help, I couldn't tell. The shadows surged forward, dragging me into their embrace, and as I felt the void beneath me yawn wide, I realized, in horror, that I had become one of them, lost, searching endlessly for a resolution, and then, abruptly, silence. An uncanny stillness settled, and as the figures withdrew, I found myself isolated in that garden of horrors, facing the mirror once more. But I wasn't alone, a new figure stood beside me, radiating malice and agony. "Now, you've truly entered the game." The figure leaned in close, its voice a velvet whisper laced with venom. "Shall we begin?" And with those haunting words, the world around me shuddered as shadows shifted, new horrors unfurling from the depths of despair, threatening to pull me back into the clutches of the unknown. The wind howled through the skeletal branches above, shrieking like a banshee as the garden seemed to pulse with dark life. The figure beside me, its ghastly grin stretching impossibly wide, dissolved into the shadows, leaving me alone once more with the mirror-esque grotesque surface, an ugly reflection of my own haunted visage staring back at me. I backed away until my legs bumped against an unseen barrier. The air was thickening, saturated with a heavy sorrow that seeped into my bones, and the whispers intensified, swirling around me like an unrelenting storm. The garden pulsed as if it were alive, sending waves of dread crashing against my heart. I turned my gaze away from the mirror, desperate to escape the inevitability unfolding within its depths. Further within the twisted pathways, the cries of the trapped souls reached a fever pitch, clambering over one another. My feet felt heavy with each reluctant step I took, as if the ground itself conspired to keep me trapped. Then, I became aware of a burgeoning light at the horizon of the garden, a shimmering beacon amidst the gloom. Hope. I lunged forward, spurred by a glimmer of desperation. The vibrant glow pulsed with warmth, almost palpable in the damp chill, drawing me in with promises of safety. But as I approached, the source of the light warped, morphing into a blinding flash that shattered my senses. Shadows recoiled, screeching in abhorrence as the light twisted a kaleidoscope of color that coiled like smoke, dissipating in a spiral of regret, and then came the screams, disembodied voices echoing from the void, memories I had buried clawing their way back to the surface. I pressed my hands to my ears, desperate to drown out the cacophony of torment that clawed at the fringes of my consciousness, moments of betrayal, whispered secrets of lost love, and the unbearable laughter of friends turned phantoms. "Help us," they cried, "we believed in you." I staggered, arms flailing as I fell into a patch of rotted soil, splintering the haunting reverie that wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. Suddenly, the warmth radiating from the light morphed into something darker, with shadows entwining themselves in mockery against its glow. The gleaming figure from before emerged once again, its laughter ricocheting off the garden walls. "Ah, my dear. You think escape lies within light?" It lunged forward, its voice like ice scraping against stone. "The light reveals the truth. That truth, my sweet, will destroy you." I scrambled to my feet, my lungs burning as I pushed back against the encroaching darkness. Something deep within my heart flickered a faint resolution to fight against the grasping void, the insatiable hunger of these haunting souls. "I won't surrender." I gasped, words echoing against the damp echoes of the desolate space. The shadows thicker than ever began to shift, forming shapes, twisted figures adorned in fabric made of sorrow and desperation, silhouettes that morphed into those I loved, their hollow eyes piercing through my resolve. They reached out, pleading with me to join them, the chorus rising once more, "You are one of us now." But just as I thought I might drown in their cries, suddenly there was a crackle in the air, a jarring shift as the all-consuming darkness paused, making room for an unspeakable terror emerging from behind the mirror, a chill rolling through the air. It was no longer the soft whispers of resignation that flooded my ears, but the guttural growls of something primal. A new presence, something far darker than I had yet encountered, surged from the mirror's depths. As I stood frozen in terror, the vile shadow took form, jagged and fierce, its jaw unhinging to reveal a cavernous maw dripping with malice. "Welcome your reckoning." It screamed, its voice terror-stricken and barbaric. I felt my soul scream for escape, but my body was rooted to the soft earth as more horrifying figures began to emerge from the surrounding shadows, each wearing a mask of despair that appeared all too familiar. Lost friends, relatives, even strangers I had brushed past. In life. They reached for me, but this time, their eyes shone with a darkness far deeper than longing. There was hunger, desperation, and the promise of vengeance. As they drew closer, I caught a glimpse of their true intent, a sharp blade clutched in each hand, glistening with the promise of dread, ready to sever one last thread binding me to this world. The shadow demon loomed closer, and a manic grin spread across its ghastly face, and then, as the shadows lunged for me and the scream escaped my lips, I felt the ground beneath me shift, and I was falling deeper into a hollow abyss, light fading away, haunted faces losing their features in a nightmare that had only just begun. What awaited me at the bottom of this dark descent? I had no strength left to fight against the tide of despair, only the deafening crunch of bones whispered my name, now more than ever becoming a part of the horrific symphony that echoed through the very fabric of this cursed realm. As I plummeted through the darkness, my fingers grasped at the air, desperately searching for something, anything to cling to. The sensation of weightlessness brought no comfort, rather, it exacerbated the mounting terror clawing at my insides. Memories of laughter and warmth disintegrated, replaced by the suffocating chill of despair. The shadows seemed to reach for me, fingers stretching like creeping vines, ready to drag me down into their abyss. That I hit the ground with a bone-jarring thud, the solid earth beneath me like the grip of an iron maiden. The darkness was thick, heavier than any night I had ever known, pressing in from all sides as if it wished to consume me whole. I lay still for a moment, gasping for air, my heart racing like a trapped bird. But the only sounds accompanying me in this suffocating void were the dry rustles of something slithering away in the unseen. Suddenly, a shimmering light appeared at the farthest edge of my vision, something so vivid it almost hurt to look at. I blinked hard, convinced myself it was merely an illusion conjured by my fading sanity. Yet, it pulsed with a rhythmic promise that called to me. An instinctive yearning swelled in my chest, forcing me to rise on trembling legs. The light flickered, coaxing me forward, an ephemeral whisper laced with urgency, but as I drew closer, a chilling realization washed over me. The light was not a beacon of hope, it flickered like a dying star, and at its center, monstrous shapes writhed. The figures in the light became clearer, garbled faces of those I'd known, haunting visages twisted in eternal agony, the same ones I had tried to escape. They turned their hollow eyes towards me, mouths moving in silent screams etched with grief. No! I gasped, recoiling as the memory of their anguish curled around my heart like barbed wire. It can't be you! But even as I cried out, the glimmer that lured me turned grotesque. My hand shot out instinctively to shield my face as they beckoned, shrieking with ghostly voices in a cacophony of despair, "You belong here." Suddenly, the ground resonated with an ominous rumble. The shadow demon from the mirror emerged, its towering silhouette eclipsing the fake luminosity, claws sharpening against the reality of my spiraling fear. "Ah, but don't forget," it crooned mockingly, "these poor souls cannot escape me. You have no choice but to join them." I stumbled back, teeth chattering against the icy chill choking out my breath. All around me, the shadows formed into a swirling maelstrom of despair, clenching around my body like an iron grip. With every breath, visions of horrifying truths unfurled like forgotten scrolls, resonating within me, nightmares of my past, things I'd lost, shadows I'd cast. Love turned to madness, friendship transformed into betrayal, and then I saw it, a flicker of silver nestled in the folds of darkness just beyond the wailing faces before me. A knife, glinting with an ethereal light, was thrust into the hands of a figure I once called friend, now twisted into malicious glee. Their eyes bore witness to horrors unknown, and when they turned toward me, whatever warmth we'd once shared had turned to a heart-stopping void. "Will you accept their fate?" The demon hissed, its breath like icy fingers creeping over my skin. The whispers swelled once more, the sorrowful choruses mingling, each grating against my resolve. "Or will you fight?" The choice surged inside of me, a radical instinct to forge forward or yield to the darkness seeping into my very essence. I took a step back, but the ground crackled beneath me, the rage of lost souls pushing me against an invisible wall. The voices roared, "We are waiting. You belong to us, join us." I felt my pulse quicken, adrenaline crashed like waves against my resolve. I had to escape this insidious chorus, this clamoring tide of torment threatening to drown me. Wielding the flicker of defiance like a shimmering blade, I pushed through the shadow, ignoring the clamoring cries and reaching out for the knife buried in the solace of darkness, just as my fingers brushed the steel. A shattering scream pierced the air, a new horror emerging from the depths, an ear-splitting wail of a creature far more sinister than the demon itself. A new presence was rising, far larger and more malevolent, clawing its way into the flickering light. I hesitated, a cold sweat drenched across my brow, as the ground beneath began to fracture, fissures opening like mouths eager to devour, and then I knew, the choice to fight bore a price, one far greater than I could ever anticipate. The shadows surged, a wave closing in around me, fingers like ice locking onto my own. "Accept your fate. Reject this world." They screamed as darkness smothered my vision, the glow receding into nothingness. With one last desperate surge, my hand closed around the hilt of the knife, and in that heartbeat, the ground beneath me swallowed the last remnants of hope. The world shattered, and I was left dangling in suspense, a single thread connecting me to an unknown fate. The cries grew louder as the darkness roared, "Now you shall learn the true meaning of despair." The air grew thicker, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud as I clutched the knife, its cold metal a stark contrast to the searing dread that rippled through my veins. It felt like betrayal to hold something so potent in a place so devoid of mercy, yet some primal instinct urged me to wield it. Terror cascaded through my body like ice water, numbing my thoughts. The wails of agonized souls morphed into a looming anticipation, an ominous countdown towards some dreadful climax. The shadows coiled tighter, squeezing my wrists as if they had lives of their own, dragging me back toward the choking darkness where pain reigned supreme. With the knife in hand, I felt an unearthly power surge through me, a whisper of rebellion tinged with desperation. "Fight!" it urged, but a deeper voice laughed, echoing from the abyss. "You think that blade will save you?" The demon's tone slithered into my mind, poisonous and disorienting. "You are nothing but another scream lost in the void, an echo among millions." At this ghostly reminder of my worthlessness, the knife pulsed with renewed vigor, a testament to my grief-driven resolve. It was then that I noticed something. The ghastly faces surrounding me began to flicker, their anguish replaced momentarily by fleeting expressions of envy, their mouths still screaming but now twisted in an unsettling semblance of satisfaction. They started to encircle me, closer now, their figures blending into a backdrop of undulating shadows, grotesque figures of despair and misery merging around the blade in my grasp. Each anguished phantom let out a sigh, and the air shimmered as the chill enveloping them began to ebb. "It chose you," they whispered with reverence, "the knife, it is the key." In shock, I gazed down at it. The blade revealed a glimmering inscription along the hilt, its letters etched in an ancient script. Words I couldn't decipher tugged at memories long buried, connections to ancestral weapons of old that were believed to hold the power of banishment against dark spirits. If only I knew how to wield it, I thought desperately. The idea felt impossible, my very essence felt unworthy of such magic. The ground itself trembled, the very fabric of the shadowy realm unraveling as the latest horror stirred with a growl that resonated through my bones. It approached, a monstrous form born from the lacerated fears of those whom I had once cared for. Ribbons of shadow unfurled from its frame, grotesque appendages writhing like serpents in the air, swiping through the darkness that had consumed my companions. I could feel its gaze upon me, a dreadful hunger that seeped through the shadows like smoke. "Do you dare challenge me?" it hissed, its voice a thunderous growl that sent ripples of dread coursing through my body. "I will not be yours," I found myself crying out, desperation fueling my words. Even as I spoke, I felt the doubt gnawing at my resolve. The haunting proclamation of my doom echoed back at me like the unshakable caress of the shadows. "Pathetic!" The shadow demon boomed, laughing as a cacophony of tortured cries erupted from the depths of its essence. The vengeful howl of the malformed souls peeled open another layer of darkness, revealing a swirling void pregnant with sorrow. "You, alone, cannot wield that which binds the lost into existence." Just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, I felt a spark of clarity and instinctual knowledge coursing through me, urging me to channel the anguish and fear that filled this place. I raised the knife like a torch against the suffocating dark, yelling as my voice entwined with the rage and pain of the haunted spirits. "I am not yours to claim." The shadows recoiled momentarily, voices freezing as if caught in a harsh light. The flickering luminance of the knife intensified, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms across the chasm. The air around me twisted, charged with anger as tortured souls momentarily paused, their breaths hitching in camaraderie. They seemed to seek something, a glimmer of life amid the chaos, but before I could process the surge of hope blossoming inside me, the demon lunged. The air thickened with malice, and I could feel its chilling breath against my skin, a prelude to the disaster that awaited if I faltered now. Suddenly, and with an unceremonious crack, the ground beneath me gave way, sending me spiraling into a gaping maw of shadows, the knife slipping from my fingers as everything around me dissolved into an endless expanse of black. And then I heard it, an unholy laughter, vibrant with triumph, crackling like fragments of shattered glass in the dark, a whisper that pricked at the edges of my consciousness. The last flicker of hope faded as the true shape of the horrifying being became evident, undulating and pulsating. Welcome to your eternity. In the chilling silence that followed, I was left hanging in the dark, a heartbeat away from an unimaginable fate, the knife lost, my grip on reality fraying as unspeakable horrors drew near. A thick mist rolled in, oppressive and soupy, clinging to my skin like a parasitic shroud as I fell through the void. The sensation of weightlessness quickly twisted into a fractal collapse, the dark clutched me tighter, suffocating any sense of direction or time. The laughter echoed faintly now, like a cruel wind submerging its words in an ocean of darkness. That I landed abruptly, a bone-jarring impact sending shockwaves through my body. The air was colder here, and the ground felt uneven beneath me, jagged stones grazing my palms as I struggled to push myself up. The malevolent laughter faded but left behind a bitter residue of dread, tinging the atmosphere with foreboding. Around me, flickering shadows began to materialize, grotesque shapes shifting and contorting in the ethereal light. My heart raced as I scrambled backwards, using the jagged ground for leverage. I instinctively reached for the knife that had slipped from my grasp, only to grasp empty air. My breath came ragged as a fresh wave of panic washed over me. "Where is it?" I gasped, the words hanging in desperation. A chorus of whispers filtered through the darkness, echoing the uncertainty in my heart, each gaze a dagger cutting into my soul. "You're nothing without it," they intoned, their words weaving a dreadful tapestry of fear closer around me. In that hollow space, I felt the ground pulse beneath my weight, a heartbeat echoing the malevolence that lurked in the shadows. From the murk, a figure emerged, tall and skeletal, its elongated arms trailing ghostly tendrils that writhed like intoxicated vipers. Its face was a mask of distorted features, cascades of anguish woven with malice, eyes hollow yet brimming with obsession. "Looking for something," it whispered, each syllable a soft caress tainted with promises of despair. The shadows quivered at its presence, amorphous figures darted closer, their eerie forms momentarily illuminated by a faint glow emanating from the very ground. I recoiled instinctively, pressing my back against the unyielding stone, but the figure, the harbinger of fear, seemed to draw power from my terror. "Do you know what it means to be lost?" it crooned, an enticing leer stretching thin across its mouth. "You were cast into the abyss, and yet, so many desires linger near you, clamoring to be fulfilled." The ground opened up again, a gaping maw threatening to swallow the shadows whole. An sway of whispers surged from below, an invitation laced with desperation, echoing the fragmented dreams of the souls confined within the depths. "Let us stay together, let us share your fate," they chorused, an agonizing plea wrapped in dissonant harmonies. My heart raced as visions swam ethereally through my mind, memories shimmering in the darkness, faces I remembered. Struggling against the suffocating presence of this malevolence, I clenched my fists, the pulse of desperation stealing my breath. "Your offers are lies," I shouted into the void, meeting the haunting figure's gaze. "I won't be trapped by your filth." It laughed then, a sound cruel and mocking, its face contorting in glee. "You think yourself superior, but every moment you linger here, shadows cling tighter. They will claim you in ways you cannot fathom." In that instant, the ground exploded, and from the chasm below erupted figures bathed in sorrow. Wispy forms tugged at me, fingers cold as ice, pupils dilated with deep, unending need, offering salvation masked as damnation. "Join us," they cried, their once distorted faces morphing into grotesque parodies of longing and desperation. They reached for me, tendrils of grief and rage pulling me between their depths. Without warning, the heartbeat of the ground intensified, rocking the very essence of my being. I stumbled, crashing against the jagged stone again, and even as I fought, I knew my will alone would not be enough. I had left the knife behind in the abyss, I was bare, vulnerable, stripped of my defenses in a place meant to corrupt even the strongest spirit. "Foolish girl," the harbinger taunted, each breath a cauldron of malicious promise. "You think you chose to fight? You don't even recognize the true terror awaiting you when the night consumes everything when the echoes will silence, leaving you stripped of choice, memory and spirit." Desperation clawed at me, a cold, sharp talon of panic as I glimpsed my own reflection in the writhing shadows. The truth crashed over me, heavy and twisted like chains. I was becoming one of them. My essence was slowly being woven into the fabric of this forsaken realm, the shadows swallowing my identity moment by moment. And just as despair sank its teeth deeper into my flesh, a piercing sound shattered the haunting symphony. A single, crisp clap, echoed in the hollow darkness. I turned, breath caught in my throat, only to see the knife, shimmering with a dark luminescence, suspended mid-air. The knife, my salvation and my curse, bathed in an ethereal aura, beckoning me to reclaim it, but as found focus washed over me, shadows lunged in an instant, flaring their grotesque forms like ravenous beasts witnessing their prey. I reached out desperately, but what had come so easily moments before, now felt impossibly distant. A cacophony of anguished screams erupted as the shadows twisted, clawing for my essence, and in that terrifying heartbeat, I realized that in my moment of need, the true horror was awakening behind me, as the ritual begun, the harbinger's wicked grin widening as unseen bonds surrounded me, pulling me deeper into the abyss. My grip faltered against the knife, the darkness leaking into my soul like poison. "You shall be one of us," it hissed, the shadows merging into a stampede of whispers around me. With a final lurch, I reached out, and time froze. The knife shimmered just out of reach, and before my outstretched fingers could graze its handle, the harbinger vanished, leaving me lost in a sea of shadows, writhing, pleading, and hungry for my surrender. As the shadows drew nearer, I breathed in, heart pounding in an emphatic drumroll of doom, absorbing the now glimmering pull of my destiny. The flickering shadows beckoned, their chilling promises heavy in the air. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a heartbeat emerging from unseen depths, throbbing like a dark drum, resonating with every ounce of dread enveloping me, holding me in place as I was caught between fate and fear. "Your past waits for you, and it's hungry for blood." The heartbeat echoed louder, pulsating through the oppressive air as it melded with my racing pulse. Time felt like quicksand, thick and treacherous, dragging me deep into the suffocating grasp of the abyss. My fingers tingled with the familiar resonance of fear, and in that fleeting moment, I could almost sense the pulse of life in the shadows enveloping me. They seemed to sway rhythmically to the ominous thrum, like puppets dancing to a forgotten lullaby. "Let us show you your memories," a voice whispered in a caress that felt almost tender, though it burnt like acid against my skin. "What do you forget when lost in the dark? What regrets linger beneath the surface?" The shadows shifted, their forms creating a kaleidoscope of familiar faces, loved ones warped into a carousel of despair, lost in the depths of their own hauntings. I recoiled as the visage of my brother appeared, his once bright eyes now dimmed, mouth stretched in a silent scream. "You abandoned me," he murmured, a string of sorrow woven into his spectral form. "You chose life over love, ignorance over truth." His voice resonated through the frigid air as if stitching tendrils of guilt back into my heart. Desperation clawed at me. "No!" I shouted, but the shadows clung tighter, their cold fingers wrapping around my wrists, ever encroaching. "You know I tried." I gasped out as a torrent of memories crashed over me, his face the last thing I'd seen before the accident that shattered my world, everything reduced to ash, yet here he was, reaching for me, the pain of unresolved questions radiating like shards of glass. "What do you want?" I cried desperately, but the shadows merely echoed my anguish, mockery entwined within their wails, creeping closer, hungry for my response. "Only to show you the truth, dear sister," they hummed, weaving back into the chaos a dance of despair that left me gasping. "You cannot run from what you've buried." Suddenly, the air thickened with a rancid scent, and I became acutely aware of something much worse lurking closer behind me. A shiver raced down my spine as the atmosphere shifted, a dark chill breaking past the barrier of reverie. The knife dimmed in its ethereal glow, a beacon of hope growing fainter as the presence behind me curled closer, like smoke circling a flame. I attempted to center my frantic thoughts amidst the turmoil around me. If I only had the knife back, I could banish the darkness. Yet, somewhere deep within, an unsettling realization took root: was the knife truly salvation, or another object of temptation twisted into destruction? "Hurry!" A ghastly wail pierced the din, and I jolted, turning instinctively to face the emerging horror. The remnants of my brother became vague in my peripheral, blurring as the shadows warped into something altogether more menacing. Out of the blackness, a monstrous form began to derive shape, an unholy amalgamation of all the specters I had feared. Eyes appeared first, countless hundreds of shimmering voids, each one a portal into an abyss of sadness and regret. A monstrous mouth gaped open wide, far too large for anything that should exist, its jagged teeth glistening like grotesque daggers in the dim light. "You cannot escape your fate," it growled, voice rumbling like thunder. "You are littered with broken promises and bitter thoughts. I will feast upon your sorrows." My instinct was to flee, but there was nowhere to run in the nearly solid darkness. The moment froze as I stood transfixed, heart racing in stark terror. I had become a prisoner not only of my own fears but also of the shadows which relished in my despair, the carved bonds of sin laid bare before me. I took a step back, breath trembling on the edge of a scream as I clutched the remnants of my sanity, desperately seeking clarity in the madness. I needed the knife, the only weapon against the accumulated sorrow, the talisman of my past that was both connected to the darkness and the thread of hope. It was merely a foot away, hovering in the grasp of whispers taunting me with the truth of my choices, but as my gaze shifted back toward the knife, the monstrous figure shifted, swirling with rage as the shadows wrapped around its form, twisting tendrils entwining it like black vines fueled by raw anguish. "You will never reach it." It roared again as I felt the pressure of its malice pressing down on me, cold sweat trickling down my spine, then a grotesque shift in the fabric of the shadows. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of desperate howls, swirling about my head, blurring the world around me. My senses were overwhelmed as I turned toward the foul mouth of the creature, yanking my gaze away from the knife, as the echoes began to form new shapes, new horrors inching forth. Great arms reached from the darkness, clawing at me, eager to drag me into their wretched embrace. The echoes of my past padded into corporeal existence, and from the demonic maw of the horror enveloping me, my brother slipped forth, barely recognizable, whispering a desperate plea, "It'll consume you. Fight it." But my arms felt heavy, the knife still just out of reach, the truth trapped in a cage of despair, and as I stood on that precipice of darkness, time unraveling, the horrific nightmare danced closer, its breath acrid with sorrow and chaos. "Join me," it beckoned, a seductive whisper that slithered through my fractured mind as the shadows closed in, "Accept your fate and all will be revealed." In the heart of that anguished moment, as paths converged and choices loomed before me like knife-edge blades, the terrifying thought settled: what if the truth I sought was far more dreadful than the shadows I feared? As the earth trembled, the sound of my brother's tortured screams merging with the thundering heartbeat of doom, my whole being screamed of impending doom, visions of the knife warping before me. With a final surge of defiance, I reached out but lost all sense as cold, clammy hands seized my wrists, the echoing whispers rising to a frenzied crescendo, and before I could discern what lay ahead the shadows claimed me, the darkness swallowed me whole, and as the last glimpse of light withdrew, a low, deep chuckle reverberated through my very being. "You have much to learn," and as it faded, I could feel the world collapsing around me, uncertainty choking me, leaving darkness as the only answer to the haunting question, "What will become of you now?" My senses flickered to life again, but they were dulled by a shroud thicker than the darkness that had consumed me. I was confined, suspended in a void where sound and time lost meaning, my heart still beating steadily against the oppressive silence. Flashes of distorted images invaded my mind, disjointed as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. Each heartbeat echoed like distant thunder, weaving layers upon layers of anguish, distorting the boundaries of past and present. That I could feel it, the specter of despair drawing close, a familiar presence tugging at my consciousness. The haunting weight of memories returned, warping in this unholy realm a dizzying carousel of faces I had long forsaken, each one bearing the markings of betrayal and grief. My mother appeared next, her features twisted in sorrow, her arms reaching out, but an invisible barrier separated us, slicing through the space like a razor, a reminder of everything I had lost. "Why did you leave me?" She wept, the anguish in her voice reverberating within that void. "You thought you could outrun your past, but it will always find you." Each syllable was a dagger to my heart, and with every beat, I felt the blood drain from my resolve. The shadows danced around her, encircling her like vultures, waiting to pick away at the bones of my regret. That I struggled against the manifestation of my grief, wanting to push back, but the burdens were tethered to me like chains. "No. It wasn't my fault." I screamed into the suffocating silence, my voice swallowed whole before it could take form. Despair wanted me to admit the truth, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. Yet, part of me began to wonder if I had really ever been free at all. The darkness writhed with hunger, an insatiable appetite lurking just beneath the surface. From within the depths of the swirling blackness, a new shape began to emerge, shimmering in and out of focus as if the very essence of hopelessness had coalesced into corporeal form. A grotesque abstraction, a harbinger of my reckless abandon. That it leaned toward me, its twisted face shifting as if it were wearing the mask of my guilt, and a sickly sweet voice emerged from the chasm between us. "You think you can resist? You are nothing without your pain. We feed on your sorrow, yet you still cling to denial. I felt the ground beneath me shift, a sickening sense of vertigo that threatened to pull me into an abyss deeper than any darkness I had encountered. As it roared avidly, my vision blurred, melding the horror before me into a kaleidoscope of everything I thought I knew. Angry resentments clawed at my heart, and I grasped for the remnants of hope, knowing the knife was eternally out of reach, caught among the phantoms I deconjured in my flight from truth. The knife can save you from this, the monster hissed, and dread crawled along my spine. But you will never wield its power while haunted by falsehoods. In that moment, a chilling realization bloomed, unfurling like a flower bred from the ashes of despair. Their words dripped poison into my ears, a profound clarity amidst the chaos. The truth had not merely lingered within the shadows, it had become the coal that fueled this fire, keeping me shackled to the remnants of my past that I forced myself to breathe, searching within the void for strength. Repressing my fears would not lead to liberation, only by confronting the shrouded horror of my choices could I hope to evade total absorption. I had become my sorrow, a vessel of everything I tried to forget that as I struggled to rise from the pit of despair, the air around me thickened, oppressive and charged. Suddenly, I could see tendrils of light breaking through the darkness, illuminating the grotesque figure before me. And for the first time, I felt the trembling presence of power, the knife, shimmering somewhere amongst the darkness. You think you can claim it? The creature spat, the shadows twisting violently, attempting to overwhelm me. No. You will remain a prisoner. With a fervent scream tearing from my lips, I lunged toward the gleaming object that beckoned from the heart of that overwhelming gloom. The gleam intensified, almost blinding as the creature curled around me in desperation, its monstrous form fluctuating like a dying star. Just as my fingertips brushed its hilt, everything froze. A wave of energy surged through me, and I was thrust outward, hurtling into an unknown realm where feelings of dread and frailty intermingled, swirling into a vortex of chaos. I was dimly aware of my brother's face materializing before me again, racked with terror mingled with an unsettling resolve. Fight it! He implored, but as my surroundings warped and the shadows lunged toward me with a primal roar, I realized the knife pulsed with a terrible energy, and something visceral within me screamed, what if I can't? The emptiness echoed that question, unanswered, roaring back as the monstrous weight bore down on my soul. With a final resolve, just as the darkness reached to drag me down into its maw, I gripped the knife tighter. The air crackled, and the shadows shrieked in cacophonous rage. You will join me. The creature howled as I prepared to plunge the knife deep into the heart of despair, uncertainty surrounding my very next breath. But before I could strike, another horrifying truth emerged, wrapping itself around me like a noose. What if you are the true monster? It whispered, taunts unraveling my senses just as my resolve was steeping in the precipice of despair, and in that chilling moment, with my brother's pained gaze fixed on mine, the knife flickered uncertainly in my grasp, and reality shattered one final time. Euphoria and dread coalesced into a singular moment as I plunged the knife through the darkness, the blade shimmering like a desperate star seeking to vanquish the imminent threat. The shadows screamed, a bubbling cacophony of anguish erupting as they twisted violently, disintegrating like smoke in a flame. But this desperate act was not without consequence. The moment the blade pierced through, the ground beneath me groaned, heaving past specters into the swirling void that cried out for connection, and then, as the darkness ripped apart like an ancient tapestry, I was engulfed by an explosion of light, the ethereal glow searing through my body, unraveling layers of shadows that had clung to me not just physically, but spiritually. I could feel warmth, the essence of those I had lost, mingling with the rushing euphoria of freedom long sought, but as quickly as it came, the light faded, a fragile glow ebbing into the silence of the abyss that surrounded me. In its wake, I found myself suspended, dangling in a chasm between realms with memories flickering away like candle flames extinguished by a gust of wind. The echoing cries of the damned followed, lingering like a bitter scent in the oppressive air. The figure before me, once twisted with malice, shimmered into focus, its true form unsettlingly familiar. It was not merely a figment of my past fears but an embodiment of myself, a reflection warped with shadow and regret. Hollowed eyes bore into my soul, pleading, taunting, you think the knife will save you? You are bound to me, a part of everything you've tried to leave behind. No. I cried out, backing away as the weight of truth crashed over me, an uncompromising wave drowning my resolve. The shadows still writhed around us, whispering insidiously of all I had cast aside. You can't have me. But I already do, it replied, an echo of resentment tangled with sorrow, fingers stretching forth to caress my cheek. Every choice you made fed into this darkness, shaping you into the vessel you despise. My heart pounded as the weight of certainty hung in the air. To renounce the shadows was to renounce my very existence, for without them, who was I? They were a part of my story, blurred lines between grief and regret, etched into the fibers of my being. I can rewrite my story. I shrieked with all the defiance I could muster, clutching the knife, the blade gleaming with untold promise. But even as I said it, the truth battled within. The whispers grew stronger as the creature's twisted grin morphed into something almost sympathetic, something all too human. You wished for ascendance, it hissed, the shadows coiling around its limbs. But this is your hell, and you are the architect. No. My scream was raw, bursting from the shadowy depths of despair. I want to be a prisoner. With one powerful motion, I raised the knife once more, plunging it down into the remnants of my distorted reflection, hoping to sever the connection, to fight against my own self-loathing. The ground trembled beneath me as layers of darkness peeled back, revealing long-buried secrets, brilliant memories once drowned in sorrow. As I pulled the knife free, blood poured from the wound, a dark stream licking at the edges of reality. But to my horror, nothing happened. The twisted reflection remained bound to me, an extension of my essence, laughing perpetually in the face of my desperation. Did you think you could slay your own heart? It taunted, the laughter resonating in the abyss, sending ripples of doubt through me. The shadows thickened, and I felt the pull of their suffocating embrace, wrapping around my wrists like a drowning grip. Join us. They howled, their voices rising in a collective plea, the faces of those I thought were lost materializing once more, agonizing expressions of love twisted into something grotesque. We are all waiting for you. Reality cracked, the lines of my existence blurring as I fell deeper into despair. I will not. With a final desperate surge, I focused all that lay before me: the fear of becoming them, the longing for release, and the memory of those I had lost. The knife pulsated with energy, my resolve intensifying. Was I merely fighting my own past, or was the knife the means to face it? And then, the abyss roared, a cacophony of rage and sorrow tearing through, the shadow's hands releasing me as I was thrown back into my own corporeal existence. I landed on hard earth, the familiar scent of my old family home enveloping me like a shroud, memories flooding my senses. That I bolted upright. This was it, the horror I had long escaped. The same house that had drawn me back into its clutches. The shadows stood there, echoing their demands, shadows desperately stretching out toward me. But this time, the knife shone brightly in my hand, a fierce light against the encroaching darkness. Let go. I screamed, my heart racing as I plunged the knife into the floor, the air crackling with energy as light erupted, splitting apart the thickened shadows around me. That a piercing wail erupted as dark tendrils recoiled, pulling back into the very corners of the room. No longer shadows of despair, they uttered a final, desperate cry: you cannot escape us. But with each keening note, I felt the very fabric of their hold weaken, fracturing like thin glass. The house trembled, the walls shuddering as the shadows exploded into churning mist around me, the remnants of tortured souls tumbling forward, lost in chaos. I had taken my stand, but as light filled the room, illuminating every crevice littered with despair, the familiar laughter hushed to an unsettling silence. In its place lay uncertainty, the air thick with unresolved tension as I turned to face the distorted reflection of myself still hidden by the doorway. Is this truly over? It whispered, its hollow gaze piercing through the dissipating light. They will always linger. You have merely pushed them away. I felt the knife begin to vibrate in my grip, a reverberation of dread, but I stood firm, stepping through the slipping shadows as they writhed at my feet. Not this time. Each footfall resonated with raw power, echoes of promise and salvation intertwined in my breath, yet even in this moment, deep within, I sensed something colder, the truth dawning heavy in my heart. Perhaps every shadow I had severed was but a whisper of the past yet unfinished, a lingering fragment of what I could not escape. They were part of me, and just then, a pervading chill crept through the air, soft and yet unnervingly real. As I stood at the door, the whispers returned faint and distant. They did not leave, only faded into echoes, remnants of a haunting reminder pressing against the periphery of my conscious mind. It dawned on me, as my breath quickened, that this fight was not a battle won but merely a lull, a haunting calm before the next inevitable clash. "Mark my words, you will never truly be free," that shadow of my own disappointment whispered menacingly, as laughter seeped into the edges of my consciousness that I stumbled forward, the echoes growing louder like a warning bell tolling in my heart. And just as I stepped into the light, sealing off my final chapter of this horror, I realized as the shadow stretched and whispered, the true terror was not the darkness behind me, but the light ahead that flickered with uncertainty, because the truth is, no matter how far you run, what hides in the corners of your mind will always remain. Even now, as I walked toward freedom, I could hear them, my past, my mistakes, still trailing behind me, still craving, still waiting to reclaim what was never fully relinquished. And as I stepped out, the door slammed shut behind me, echoing like a final scream lost in the darkness as their whispers slipped into the night. The insidious laughter grew ever closer. Until next time.